Hi, I'm Fred Pang. I've been in Goodwin House now for about a year and a half, and I was asked to share my recollections about 9/11. So let me start. 20 years ago, on 9/11, I was at the Army-Navy Country Club in Arlington to attend an Armed Forces Reserve Forces Policy Board meeting. It was supposed to start at 9 a.m. We were told that our keynote speaker, Dr. David Chu, the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness at the time, would be a few minutes late. He arrived about 5 minutes after the hour. In his opening remarks, he apologized for being tardy. He quipped that we all have bosses, and his boss, Donald Rumsfeld, had called a meeting to let the leadership know that a plane had struck the World Trade Center. It was obvious later that he didn't know that it was not a small plane. Otherwise, he would not have joined us. He was about 15 minutes into his remarks when an Army sergeant burst in, yelling that a plane had just hit the Pentagon. We were stunned. We rushed to the roof to see a plume of smoke billowing. Dr. Chu immediately excused himself and said he had to get back to his office. At that point, it was obvious that he was unaware that the World Trade Center was hit by two large aircraft. We turned on the TV, and there it was. We learned that for the first time. My initial reaction was shock that what was unfolding could happen to us. Then, as we learned more, I felt sad for the people who were killed and injured in what I came to realize was a well-coordinated suicide attack on multiple targets. I could not figure out how that could have happened with us at least having an inkling of it. On a personal level, I worried about 3 colleagues who went to the Pentagon that morning to meet with General Maude, who was then the Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel of the Army. They worked for Booz Allen, and I was a consultant to them on a project to refine the way the Army handled delivery of entitlement and benefit services to survivors. They were there to brief the general. I had told them earlier about the meeting I had on my schedule, and they told me while it would be nice for me to be with them at this meeting, that I could skip it. Frankly, I wouldn't be here if I did not skip it. Minutes after I returned home at around 11 a.m., I got a call from the wife of one of the Booz Allen employees that I knew. His name was Terry Lynch. She was relieved to hear my voice because she had assumed that I was with her husband at the Pentagon meeting. When I told her I was not at the meeting, she exclaimed hysterically that Terry was dead. I told her not to assume that I would start making calls to find out what was going on. I got through to the leadership of Booz Allen. They confirmed that they had not heard from their 3 employees. They knew the location of General Maude's office and knew by then that it was at the point where the plane made a direct hit. I went to Terry Lynch's house to be with his wife as I stayed in touch with Booz Allen. By 3 p.m., they confirmed that all 3 had perished. A sad day for me personally, and a sad day for our country. Every 9/11 since, I have reflected on that fateful day. I think about what could have been done to prevent the attack. I think about the innocent lives that were lost. I think about the heroism of the first responders. And I think about how our daily lives have been changed from a society of relatively free access to one of regulated, screened access. I think about the ugliness of physical barriers around our public buildings, the TSA, the Department of Homeland Security, and the costs associated with them. I wonder if we could ever return to how it was before 9/11. I don't think so. When the Taliban refused to hand over Osama bin Laden after the 9/11 attacks, we, along with the coalition forces, invaded Afghanistan. The Taliban was driven out to take refuge in Pakistan. A new government under Karzai was installed. We could have declared victory and left. We did not. We chose to stay, to occupy and nation build. We got mired down in a long war that 20 years later had us retreat in disarray. Shortly after the Afghanistan invasion, we invaded Iraq under the guise that the country was stockpiling weapons of mass destruction. We learned later that wasn't true. We captured and killed Saddam Hussein. It was a display of American military might. Along with our coalition partners, we overwhelmed and routed the Iraqi army. A new government was formed. We could have declared victory and left, but we did not. We chose to occupy and nation build. We withdrew 10 years later. It was far less messy than Afghanistan, but certainly not mission accomplished. We live in a vastly changed and dangerous world, and as we contemplate our way ahead as a country, we should recall the words of Teddy Roosevelt as a guide. Quote, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." Unquote. That is to me the aftermath of 9/11 as I reflect on it. Thank you for listening to me.